off through the market.
Check, check, quick sound check. Can everybody hear me loud and clear? Happy Sunday. Welcome everyone to the market kickoff. Hopefully everybody had a great weekend. Did something fun off the charts this weekend. Didn't have to pay attention to what these markets were doing, but we are back. Like we're good with the audio and the video. Thank you, Andrew, for sharing those. Welcome to the market kickoff, everyone. This is our first time meeting. The goal of this segment is to review or prep for the week ahead in the markets. There's been a lot of uncertainty in the market, so prep kind of feels like you can have a general plan, but then you maybe just throw it out the window depending on what the news is. But we'll do our best to try to identify levels that the market is trading to or has the potential to trade to, and come up with a plan for the week. This is our first time meeting. I'm Coach Jay, been a Topstep performance coach since June of 2023. Been trading for the past 13 years and in the futures markets for the past 6. Trader Mike says, put your armor on. So let's get right into the markets. We are going to open up in about 15 minutes. Again, anything I say on this segment is for educational purposes only. Nothing should be considered any type of trading or investment advice. I know Nightbot is going to come through and share the risk disclosure a couple times, but make sure you read through that, right? Anything we say here, I may be placing some trades, but if I do, I'm doing so at my own risk, and you should do the same. All right, so we did have some news come out over the weekend. I think I've seen some people post it in the chat also, that some of the tariffs are delayed, including tech and semiconductors. I just read a headline that those are going to be retroactive to April 5th. So we've probably gone a week with those tariffs in place. So any costs that were incurred because of those tariffs are going to be retroactively reimbursed. And I did see a headline from Lutnick that said that tariffs for semiconductors were going to come a month from now, right? So we know some of the tariffs have been delayed 90 days. So we got a couple of comments. The tariffs have been postponed, and we're looking at potentially a month from now. So what does that mean for the markets, right? We know that the very heavy sell-off that we saw started after what was Liberation Day, where we saw all those big numbers come out for tariffs. Most of those have been postponed, and the tariffs that we had with China were kind of the one that were still up in the air, and those seem to be delayed now as well. So does that mean that with all the bad news out of the way, can the markets just continue to rise from here? We will see. That being said, let me share this really quick, because we are in an environment where we've had to consider the limit prices, right? Limit up, limit down prices. So I'll get these up when I get a chance. As soon as those pop up, just so we're aware of those. Remember, any of the limit up prices are only going to come into effect in the overnight session. We're not going to have to worry about limit up during the New York session, when most of us are probably trading. Second, how was everyone's weekend? Everybody had a good weekend? Not do too much this weekend. Pretty chill, which is good though. Get this image up here in a second. Here we go. So you guys can take a screenshot of this. These are the price limits that we have to worry about for today. for the 5% up is what we're going to have to worry about if we gap up, right? I know reading on Twitter, there's been a bunch of talk about, hey, markets are just going to kind of skyrocket now because we have all of the bad news out of the way. So we will have to watch for these limit prices. Again, you can take a screenshot of these with Topstep accounts. If you're in an XFA or a live account, you got to be conscious of the markets being around these limit prices. You do want to just go ahead, and I'm going to do it on my screen as well. 19,747. Just going to mark these out. These are probably going to be the first levels that I put on my chart just to know when we're at these levels. We might not even come anywhere close to them, but when we do, I don't want to be in a position where, I get auto liquidated out of a trade because I'm not aware of them. Nicholas Cruz says, I don't think we gap up. We will see. We will see. Let's put it in the chat. Let's put a 1 in the chat if you think we gap up, 2 in the chat if we think we gap down, or 3 in the chat if you think we open up flat. 7. See some 1s in the chat thinking we gap up, 19,747. A lot more 1s than 2s. I would agree with that. If I had to pick a direction, I do think it's potentially going to be a gap up, but we will see. All right, I'm on a daily chart in the NASDAQ here. Let's go out to a weekly to start. And the first thing I want to look at is this 200 moving average on the weekly. That was the low of the week. We talked about this a little bit with Hoag last week. This 200 moving average, we don't hit often. The last time we were under this 200 moving average was 2022. And then if we look back again, there was another test during COVID that looked very similar to this one. We're not going to be able to see it on these charts, but if you pull up a continuation chart and you can go back to some data, in 2022, you can see that the market came down exactly like this. That happened on some limit down days, but we checked that 200 moving average, bounced off of it, and that was the low of the COVID move. So this looks very similar, right? Last week was a very bullish week if we look at this price action, but we still are technically in a downtrend. But this 200 moving average test is, I'm looking at this as maybe the potential low of the move if all of the bad news is out of the way. Right, let's go down to a daily chart. A couple of things I'm looking at on the daily. We have Wednesday's price action. So Wednesday's price action, the high of that move was 19,377. The low of the move 18,734. That was that crazy 2,600 point day. And so far we are holding above 50% of that imbalance, right? Buy side imbalance. So this was the day the president said, now is a great time to buy. And if you bought it, you agree with him. So if we're holding above here, above this 50%, 1860, we can see 50% of that level held on Friday's price action, right above that 18,000. Then, my first area to look at is the high, right? So 19,400. Do we trade up there? And are we, are buyers convinced enough to continue pushing these markets higher? So 19,400, we have this 20 moving average that I have on my chart here as well, 19,285. So far on the way down, that's been a resistance. But if we can start to find some daily closes above that, then I'm looking for, the market to trade back up to the 50 moving average, which is all the way up at 20,507. Right. So I'm leaning bullish until the market gives me a reason not to, just because of this Friday's price action. But if we come up here to this 20 moving average or the high of Wednesday's price action, again, that's up near, we'll call it 19,400. If we can't find buyers up there, then, nothing has changed, right? We've been in a downtrend for a month and a half. I think for us to really say that we have a market structure shift, we need to close above this 19,400 level here and then start making our way back up to 20,000. Right. Big gap up incoming based on what I see right now. Andrew, I would agree with you. I think we're going to see a gap up. And then let's say we got the 19,400 level already. We already know 20,000 is going to be a major psych level that everyone's trading. Then there was April 4th. Right, so this daily candle right here. Let's actually go down to a 30-minute and we'll take a look. looking for, is it April? Okay, April 4th, this 30-minute candle right here. I think we're already trading above it. Yep. Okay, so this candle was China's retaliation, right, to Liberation Day. And now we have to worry about the Liberation Day prices as well, right? This was the president's announcement. We can see we rejected at that area. So again, if we trade above 19,400, I'm looking for the market to trade through this zone now. Right? We had that heavy price action to the downside after all of the tariffs were announced. We have not traded back inside those prices since it happened. So 19,400 is the low here. We accept back inside this range, then we rotate back up to 20,000. All right. Did not review gold yet. Going over the equities first. Let's go over the S&P really quick. Similar story in the S&P. If we look at the weekly, tag that 200 moving average. On the daily, the 20 moving average is at 55.53. So we do need to, in order for me to be really convinced about this move on a higher time frame, we need to settle above that 55.53 20 moving average. The high of Wednesday's move, 55.24, would be the first area I'm looking to trade to. So what I'm doing this weekly prep, I'm looking for what has the potential to happen at the end of the week. For Monday's price action, unless we get a crazy move, I think a successful Monday for buyers would be a close above 55.22. Right? If we can do that, then we can start talking about levels higher, but we have to do this first. Right? Because otherwise, we're still in that downtrend. Let's go back out to the 30-minute chart and just find the Liberation Day candle, which is this price range right here, 56.20 at the low, 57.74 at the highs. So again, if we get above the Wednesday's price action, 55.20, then I'm looking for the market to rotate through Liberation Day. This will be the second goal for buyers this week, and then we can start talking about the highs. To the downside, just because we have to look both ways. Again, if we reject at 55.22, 55.20 area, then I'm looking for this market to rotate through the lower end of this range here. 50% first. Do we sell through this 5,200 and then back down to 48.71? I personally don't see this as the case if we're talking about delaying tariffs, but Andrew sent me a message in the Discord chat. He says, "Is this a quiet week or madness again?" I'm expecting it to be quiet or potentially moving to the upside, but we got to expect the unexpected in these markets, right? Anything can happen, an announcement can happen, so just watch out. All right, we're going to open up in 2 minutes here, and anyone who said a gap up, we did gap up. So gapped up here. Give me 1 second. Let's get to the percentages. Right now, the S&Ps are up 1%, 1% gap up. NASDAQ 1.5% gap up. Turn off these audio cues really quick. All right, so we gapped up. S&P order book is pretty thin right now. This looks like a NASDAQ order book. Let me take a look at what the NASDAQ looks like. So if anyone is trading this, just be careful. There's a huge spread right now. NASDAQ spread, I'm looking at 50 ticks, 20 ticks. So just be careful trading this, guys, especially in a live account. But here we are already. We tagged that 200 moving average on the, the 20 moving average on the daily, right? We talked about that in NASDAQ 19,238. That's the high of the session so far and rejecting off of it. So again, for me, this is a downtrend until we can start to close the daily above that. If that's going to reject there and continue to do that, then I'm not looking at any convinced buying until we can do this. Trump on Truth Social said tariffs are back on. Is that right? I have financial juice up, so I am looking for headlines. If that's the case, then uh, we just sell off here. I do have financial juice open. Oh, okay. I see a comment from the president here. There was no tariff exception announced on Friday. Okay, so here's the thing here, guys. In this environment, uh, it's kind of hard to even tell what's going on, right? It seems like the news changes at the drop of a dime. And I think for me, what I've been kind of seeing and where I've seen some success is maybe not paying so much attention to a headline when it comes out and just waiting for uh, the price action to start, right? I've been trading on a much lower time frame, uh, and just waiting for some volume to come in and then taking my trade opportunities from there. Because if we try to trade the headlines, they can change minute to minute, it seems like. But we did gap up. So all the ones in the chat, you were right. You guys can see we rejected right off that 20 moving average on the daily. And that's the line in the sand for buyers. If they can't trade above that, then we rotate right back down into Wednesday's price action. And then I'm looking at 18,100s as a target to the downside. Let's take a look at the S&Ps really quick. S&P didn't exactly get up to that 20 moving average, but the same idea. We can't get above it on the daily, then this is still a market that's in a downtrend, and this was just a short covering rally that we saw on Wednesday. All right, let's take a look at gold on the daily. Gold is a market that has been by the dip. We got a nice pullback in gold last week. We got a little extended, right? On Liberation Day, we hit 3,200 in gold. Got a little bit extended from that, 20, 50 moving average. So this just looks like a healthy pullback in gold, where I think this is a market that's going to continue to make all-time highs, especially in this environment. We came down, checked the 50 moving average, and bounced right off of it, and saw buyers come in kind of immediately. So I'm looking, if I'm trading gold, I'm looking to buy it. We are maybe a little extended again. This move kind of happened pretty quick, but I'm not looking for the same kind of pullback here. In gold, I'm looking at 3,200 now to hold as a support, right? We haven't really tested it. We kind of just blew through the area. Friday, we somewhat used it as a support. Let's take a look here, 3,200 evens. That would be the low of what I'm looking at in gold. We're on the 30-minute. We're above the 200 moving average, which is down at 3,104. But again, I'm not expecting too much of a pullback, maybe to last week's high. That was around that 3,200. Sorry, that was not last week's high. This is a prior week's high. Test that 3,200, see if buyers are convinced there. I'm looking for gold to be trading. We're not far from 3,300 at this point. We're about 2% off of 3,300. Gold has been in this uptrend for, count how many years you want to, but gold has been in this uptrend, and I don't see it stopping now, especially with the environment that we're in right now. So any pullbacks, I'm looking to buy in gold, and I'm not looking for a deep pullback, right? 3,200 would be the first spot that I'm looking at if we get that far. But I see a continued rally here. Shanti is going well, going well. How are you? How are you doing today? Are you pulling a VWAP from Liberation Day? We can do that. Let's take a look. So Liberation Day was the 3rd. Let's do that in all the markets that we have here, right? So anchored VWAP from the 3rd in gold, it's much lower, right? Much lower. If we're looking at this, this is kind of telling us that there should be a pullback, potentially back to volume, because that's the highest volume that we had. Let's take a look at that anchored VWAP in the NASDAQ. Right, same thing here, where we've gotten extended from it. A pullback to it would not be too surprising. Yep, trade safe, everyone. Especially in these markets, again, this spread in the NASDAQ is anywhere from 8 ticks to 50 ticks. Shorts look like they're squeezing themselves. Let's see what happens at kind of any of these major levels. What I'd be looking at, I'm on a shorter time frame chart at this point, and I do this for every session. It's kind of anchoring VWAP to the beginning of the market and seeing where we go from here, right? So we have a huge range in the first I look at a 3-minute chart, 250-point range. Let's see whether or not we stay in this range or we go and fill the gap. Again, we gapped up probably 1.5% in the NASDAQ, so pretty big gap there. Hill the King says, I want to short so badly. Whether you short or take a long, just limit your risk. I think this is still an environment where it makes sense to trade in micros with just the volatility that we have. But there's a ton of opportunity in that. Give me 1 second, guys. I need to go on. All right. We got a question here from It's Johnny. What's up, Coach Jay? Do you just use your moving averages to determine the daily bias? I do. You can see I don't really pull up the moving averages on shorter time frames, but what I'm looking at normally is on the daily. And I gotta give a shout out to Coach Paul. I work with Coach Paul doing At the Buzzer. Him and I have been working together for almost 2 years now, and I implemented these in my trading after working with Coach Paul. Right, so on a higher time frame, I'm looking at a daily. If we're under the 200 moving average on a daily, under the 20, I'm looking at that as, this market is in a downtrend and there's opportunities to sell. Now, with that bias, does there mean that there aren't times where I take counter trend trades? I do, right? I will take long trades, but when I take a long, if it's a counter trend, if I take a counter trend trade, right, counter the higher time frame trend, I have to think about that when I set the expectations for the outcomes of my trades, right? In this environment, yeah, you can get, a 200-point counter trend move. But in normal environments, I'm thinking, okay, what is the normal counter trend play, right? Because markets just don't go straight up and down. So if it's moving counter trend and the average counter trend move is 50 points in the NASDAQ, if I have a trade that's 48 points or 40 points, I'm thinking about taking profits instead of saying, hey, this is a move that needs to run 300 points because I am counter the trend, right? And then I'll look at them on a 30-minute chart as well. And same idea on the 30-minute, it's telling me, this medium time frame, we're in an uptrend, where we're above that 200 moving average. But on the higher time frame, we are in a downtrend. So I'll start with the daily, go to the 30, and see where we rejected on that daily, right at that 20 moving average. This market is still technically in a downtrend. Coach Paul reminds me of the equalizer. All right. So we went over NASDAQ, we went over the S&P. Let's take a look at crude oil, which has been moving a ton as well. Similar story here in crude oil. I think Wednesday's price action for most of these markets that we're going to trade is going to be extremely important. We haven't left this range. We're continuing to trade in it. I think what we can do is anchor a VWAP there, and it's a flat line. What does a flat VWAP mean? Range bound markets where unless this VWAP leaves this range, price might be going, but volume is not going with it, which would be concerning if I was buying this, right? If this price left this range to the upside and this VWAP stayed flat, I'm looking for trades back to that VWAP because what it's telling me is since this point, volume is not convinced about the price action outside of here. So in crude oil, similar thing. Let's look at this $63 level, just the high of this range. This is actually a pretty easy prep here because I think this Wednesday handle is going to tell the story for most markets. If we can't trade outside of this, then we just continue to range for the week. Uh, if we sell below 50% of it, then we look at the lower end to trade. And this is again in most of the markets that we're looking at. And then if we accept above, then I'm looking for a potential trade up to that 20 moving average on the daily, which is at 66 even. My voice is cracking. I don't know why my voice is cracking right now. Right. Tom says, "Are you sticking with the 3-minute for trades, or have you dropped down to a 1 or 2 minute?" I'm sticking with the 3-minute. For me, it's quick enough where I can do most of my analysis on a 30-minute chart on a daily, and then the 3-minute, I probably don't need to zoom in any more than that. Uh, but I've heard some traders. I was actually looking just out of curiosity. Heard some traders, saying that they're using a 15-minute chart, or sorry, 15-second chart. And just looking at it, it does maybe give you a picture of the volume, right? We've seen Jack a couple of times pull up a 1 second chart to look at the volume that trades in the equity markets. I just can't keep that chart up for very long, right? Looking at 1 second candles all the time. For me, I'd rather look at time and sales, but whatever works for you, continue to do that. So big range so far to open up all these markets. If we look at VWAP, it's a pretty flat line. So maybe quick scalp opportunity for a long here. Everyone's going to be asking the question: Do we leave this gap? The low of the gap 54.30, and we'll call the high of the gap where we closed on Friday 54.30 in the S&Ps. 53.90 would be a gap close to me. 53.90 and 54.30 at the high. Let's take a look at the NASDAQ. We open up here. All right, 19,224. I measure that the same way? I think so. Nope. All right, that's the gap, right? Because that's where we opened. Sorry, so 53.90 and 54.50 at the high. I'm going for where we open these markets. In the NASDAQ, 19,224 at the high, 18,800 at the low. Right, so everyone's going to be looking to see whether or not we close this gap or do we leave it. This gap does not have to be filled, right? We've seen it a couple times recently where we open up with a gap and it doesn't get filled, or it gets filled later on in the week. But if we start to trade below 19,000s, then yes, that will be the objective, close the gap. It's Sunday. Why are you trading? I see Ghost. I'm probably not going to trade. We're just prepping for the week. I'm probably not going to place a trade right now. If I do, it'll be a little bit later, right, when the Asia session opens and we see some more volume coming in. But for right now, I'm not looking to place a trade. We talked about the Wednesday candle in a couple different markets. In gold, we can see it left, right? It left this range and continuing to trend higher. Any pullbacks at 3,200 or VWAP from Wednesday's price action, which should trail higher. I'm looking to buy off of those. All right. If you guys do have any questions, let me know. Put them in the chat. How many screens do you trade in? Any resources you like to keep up? Yeah. So I trade on one screen for the most part. What you see on my charts is pretty much what I have. The only other resource I keep up is Quantower. And in Quantower, I'm basically just looking for specific volume. Let me see if I can pull it up. I think I actually closed Quantower. 1 second. Get the Quantower charts up. I'll show you guys what I'm looking at over there. But I'm just looking for volume. Jeremy John says, what's my overall strategy? My overall strategy is to identify the flow of the market and get in the flow of the market, right? So I'm reading volume to see not just price action, right? We have some price action traders, some great traders on Topstep that are price action traders. For me, I'm a volume analyst. So it's pretty much price action, but with the addition of volume analysis just to confirm the moves, right? So, I'm looking for any type of high volume. It's something like this in gold. What you'll see me do is attach VWAP to that volume, and then I'm trading from there, right? If we stay inside a range like this of high volume, I'm looking at this as a range bound market. Once this volume leaves the range, right, this VWAP leaving the range, then we start to trend. And now if we start to do this, my job is not to fade this trend. It's to trying to find a way to get in the trend, right? If we are flat and I'm going to trade, my job is to trade like a range bound market and not look for breakouts. But once we start to break out, I'm not going to fade the volume, right? So I'm looking for opportunities to buy as close to this VWAP as possible, and then the same thing in a downtrend. But yeah, usually have two screens. So I have 4 screens total. I have charts on probably 2 of them. Chat is on another one. Short is beautiful. You guys short right now? Let's see. I got a question. What made you go 0 DTE futures? I don't know if I would consider futures 0 DTE, but I get what you're saying, right? Futures are binary. You're either in or out. Um, I do trade options as well, right? I do trade options as well. I don't trade zero DTE options as much. Even though once in a while I will place the trade zero DTEs. I think I actually on Friday I placed a zero DTE trade, uh, where it was later on in the day, kind of got the price action that I was looking for, and we were chopping around in the equities. Um, so with small risk, I put on a long in the SPX, just because it was, hey, I didn't want to sit in this consolidation. Put on a long. Most of the time, if I'm trading options, I'm selling options. Here we go. The short is looking pretty good. How does futures options work? Similar to regular options, Coach Paul would be the guy to give a futures options class. If we ever have, and we might have futures options available with Topstep, Coach Paul would definitely be the guy to give those classes. People are usually using them to hedge options positions. I see you guys use the DOM quite a bit. How does that work? So depth of market here. Again, I'm a volume analyst, and here we go. Talk about filling the gap. Are we filling it right now? We might just get it here. And if the news was that there's no delay, news was no delay, then yeah, we just go right back to where we came from. You're in it from 19804. Nice trade. I do like that, right? So we had this kind of range here of this 3 minute candle. VWAP was flat, so any pushes to the upside weren't met with any real buying volume. So it's a quick fade short. The one thing I don't love about trading right now is how thin this market is. Uh, like with a live account, I would look at this and be like, I'm probably not going to put too much money at risk, but it's a valid trade, right? From the price action itself, we've seen thin markets before. If you look at something like RBOB gasoline futures, there's usually by default an 8 tick spread in that market. So as long as you're comfortable trading with that spread, uh, you know, manage your risk. But I wouldn't say it's the wrong trade. There's no bad or good trade as long as you manage your risk. What's shaking in the S&Ps? Let's take a look. Similar thing. We're about 50% through that gap. We have, let's put on some top step levels here. I don't know if these are updated yet. I don't think so. We have Friday's high. We kind of tagged Friday's high 54.18 and bounced from there. So filled 50% of the gap and bouncing from there. Again, we had the story on the higher time frame. Do we fill that gap? Do we trade above 55.20s? Same story here. What, if any, is the correlation between the ES and the 2 year notes? If there is a sell off in bonds, should the S&Ps fall? Uh, I'm probably not the guy to answer that question. We have Jack, who's on Topstep TV. He's our bond guy. I get all my information from him. I would think that that's the correlation, but I haven't studied that correlation enough to say that yes, the treasuries are selling off, the equity should as well. But if that's a pattern that you found, continue to use it. But it's not something that I look at personally. As a new trader, what's a good strategy to start with? I hear terms thrown around about support and resistance, breakouts, chart patterns, etc. What would be a good one to learn as a beginner? I think a good strategy to learn is potentially support and resistance, but I hesitate to say support and resistance because if I define something as a support, that kind of predisposes any trade I take from that level to be a long. Now, is that wrong? No, right? If the market comes down to a support that you've identified as a support, should you be looking long? Yes. But just because I've identified something as a support doesn't mean it has to support the market, right? So learn levels first, right? If we look on a higher time frame, right, try to identify some levels. I can see, and it doesn't take a whole lot, right? I see the market bounce here the last time, right? I don't even need to quote prices. I just see whatever this zone is right here, right? The market bounced around that zone. So the next time we trade to it, what I want to see is how the market responds to that zone. And that's it, right? Because for me, being a volume trader, support and resistance is only support and resistance if the volume agrees, right? I could have said, someone could say, oh, yeah, the market, this was a support last, August 2024. So when the market trades there, I'm just going to buy it again, right? Because it bought it the last time. That's a support. and the market sold through that level like it wasn't there, right? So I think it's important to stay current in the time frame that we're in. But you can look to the left for a general idea, but the market does not have to respond the same way every time. So uh, have levels, and then we need to interpret how the market is responding around those prices when we get there. Why do you use a 3 minute chart? It's just a preference. I think a 1 minute chart is a little too quick. 3 minute kind of is in the middle. Um, and I don't stay on a 3 minute. I usually go between a 30 and a three. On my other screen, where I have a couple of different markets up, I'm only looking at 30 minute charts over there. And then when I get down to execution time, I'll switch over to a 3 minute. Do you have a course on volume? I did a couple of classes in Discord, in the coaches library in Discord. If you check there are a couple classes there. They're kind of old. I think they're going back to early 2024. Topstep did do the 150K subscriber giveaway, and in those classes, if anyone signed up to take classes with me, when we do technical analysis, we'll just do volume analysis. The entire hour will be volume analysis, and I'll probably put together a couple more videos to put those in Discord so we have those. Uh, Johnny had asked about the DOM. Sorry, Johnny, I kind of skipped over your question. So, when big orders come through the DOM, is it smart to follow the direction of these orders, whether they're buyers or sellers? It's a good question, right? And the answer I'm going to give, Johnny, is it depends. So, your first question asks, how do you use the DOM? Basically, I'm looking to see whether or not there are big orders out in the market. And right now, I think a good way to use it is to see whether or not there is liquidity in these markets. If you look at the NASDAQ right now, I have this DOM up. I'll zoom in so you guys can see it a little bit better. There is about an 8 tick spread. So, what this is telling me first, if I look at the DOM, is that these markets are very thin. If I just look at the candles, I won't know that, right? And the thing about these thin markets is if there's a 50 tick spread in the NASDAQ, this is where you'll get a lot of slippage in your orders, right? You may not get filled at the price that you're looking to get filled at because there are no orders out there. But in a normal market where there is depth, I'm looking at the 10-year right now. You can see it. See how this market isn't moving around so crazy because there's, orders, there's 90 up, then 60 up from there. So this is not a thin market. This is a thick order book. Go back to the NASDAQ. This is a thin order book. You get a thin order book, when volume trades, price is going to go all over the place. And that's kind of why we've been seeing these huge moves in the equities. Uh, Now, the second part of your question, do you follow bigger orders? I'm going to say it depends. On some days, you're going to see bigger orders out there on the DOM, and the market just trade through them and continue to go, right? Those are usually trending days. On other days, you'll see a big order out there and the market rejects at it and sells away from it, right? If the order is above us. So I think it's important to determine the personality for the day, right? Is the market filling those orders or is it running away from those orders, right? Because those are going to give you two different day types, right? If I see a 100 lot or 200 lot in the NASDAQ show up on the ask, right, which is a passive sell, the market gets up there and trades through it and keeps going, then it's going to continue to trend. And Locke says it's useless. That's an opinion. That's an opinion. And I think that goes with anything. Anything. It depends, right? Does support and resistance work? Does anything work in trading? I think anything works to the extent that it helps you make a trading decision. We do have some earnings out this week. Bank earnings starting this week, starting Monday. See, we got Goldman Sachs, Bank of America, Citibank, Johnson and Johnson. Uh, I think we have some earnings later on the week, but that's what I see currently. And then let's take a look at the calendar to see if there are any planned numbers out. Got a Bank of Canada rate decision, retail sales on Wednesday. Monday is not too much. Canadian CPI, that might move the markets a little bit. Retail sales Wednesday. Of course, crude oil inventories Wednesday as well. Thursday's jobless claims is normal. Housing starts. Not too much on the calendar this week, as far as big numbers go. But if you've been paying attention, those big numbers really haven't been moving the markets as much, right? It's been the anytime we get a uh, news about tariffs, those have really been the market movers. So um, just pay attention to those. If you're watching Top Step TV, you're going to hear the team announce them. Eddie's been doing an amazing job. They've been keeping Eddie busy, man. I don't know if you guys been watching Top Step TV, but he has been on top of the news every time there's a headline that comes out. It's funny, MP had posted a text from one of his friends, and they said they saw the markets moving pretty crazy, and the first thing they did was go check Topstep TV. So it's cool to be in that space right now, where markets are actively moving, and traders would you know go to CNBC or Bloomberg, but you're coming to Topstep TV to get that information. And if especially if you're making intraday trading decisions, you're going to the place where you say, okay, well, how can I trade that, right? If I'm making day trades, right? So if there are any questions, let me know. A couple of other things, and again, I do at the buzzer a market recap every day after the close, 4:15 Eastern time, 3:15 Central. And I work with Coach Paul on that, right? Something I ask Coach Paul at the end of every session, is for his scouting report, right? Any markets that are maybe outside of what we normally look at that are potentially presenting opportunities. Um, the Swiss franc, and if anyone joins at the buzzer, you guys know Coach Paul was talking about the Swiss franc from this cross of this 200 moving average on the daily. Um, and it's been a 7% trend up since that point. Uh, what I'm looking at, and I think we could probably look at many of the currencies that we're trading. We are coming up to some higher time frame potential resistance, right? If I'm looking back to 2023, 2024, we sold off when we got up here. So if the Swiss franc is done finding buyers and continuing higher, then I might look for potential to sell back down into this range, just because that's what the market's done for the past couple of years, right? These are maybe different circumstances that we see ourselves in now, but from a price perspective, if this is a higher time frame resistance and I can't find buyers up here, I'd be looking to sell back into this range, back down towards that 200 moving average. Do you ever look at cumulative delta for entries or exits with volume? Not necessarily cumulative delta, but I do look at delta. Uh, I'll look at delta on a shorter time frame. I'm looking at every kind of 3 minute candle. I'm looking at delta that way. Give me one second. I closed Quant Hour, trying to get it opened up again, so I kind of show you guys that over there. But cumulative delta, I think, is a great indicator. It Second, guys. Blue boy, exactly. I look at delta by the moment, right? So it's kind of one second here. Show you guys exactly what I look at. Give me a second to open up that chart. But if you guys have any questions, any other questions, let me know. I'm still not convinced on this short. Extremely risky. Uh, yeah, I mean, I don't necessarily see anything definitive in this price action right now. The short looks good to go close the gap. But the reason I personally wouldn't be trading it is just because of the lower volume. Uh, if we got this VWAP to leave this range, right? If this red line leaves this purple box here, then then yeah, I agree with it. But until that happens, I don't necessarily see a trade. Does that mean that there isn't a trade here? No, there's just not one that fits my strategy. And I think now more than ever, especially in these volatile markets that we're seeing, it's important to stick to whatever your strategy says. Right? You might see somebody make a ton of money, but if it doesn't make sense to you how they got to that point, then it's not worth trying to figure it out. Oh, it's not worth trying to chase the move. Right? Maybe you can try to figure it out and say, okay, what were you looking at in order to make that trading decision? But if it's not something that fits your strategy, you don't have to take the trade, because that's how we get caught up trying to chase profits and you know chase big P&L screenshots. Right? Any other markets you guys want me to go over, let me know. We'll probably go for another 15 minutes. I am going to pull up uh, on tower chart really quick. Uh, CQG or Rhythmic. I'm using CQG data. data. Gold looks like it's doing a 3-bar reversal. Platinum, RBOB and Platinum. All right, over those two. Let's do that first, and then we'll go over the Delta stuff. RBOB, gasoline futures. Same thing. I'm going to go out to a daily. Huh. Similar to crude oil, maybe this looks very much like a crude oil chart, right? Where we kind of have this demand area that we found on a higher time frame. Every time we've been down here over the last 4 years, the market has found a buyer, has found buyers. So again, I'm looking at this Wednesday price action. We're trading pretty close to $2 even right now. And again, look at the spread in the RBOB, right? It looks like the NASDAQ chart. Not a whole lot of liquidity on this market, but it does move. Yeah, so same thing here. Frame out Wednesday's price action on the daily, and that's your range, right? The market has to decide what it's doing there. Right now, we kind of feels like we're in the middle, but if we get down towards this 50% area, then I'm looking to see whether or not that holds as a support. We can see it did it over the past couple of days. If this doesn't hold, then we trade to the lower end of it. In order to trade back up, and on a higher time frame, I do like this kind of like a range bound trade, just to find buyers here, but that would be a swing trade, right? On a swing trade, I might buy it here, set risk below the lows, and just let it work. We don't have that luxury as a day trader, right? So we have to say, how do I trade it in the day time frame? Right now, where we're sitting, I don't see too much of an opportunity. But if we trade down to 50% of here, maybe if this starts to just trend up, then I'm looking for this upper end as a uh, target, then using that target as a level. If we support above there, then we're trading back up towards the 20 moving average. Right? How do you change the colors of the candles on your charts? That's an easy one. Right click, settings, and just change these colors here. What is the tool that I'm using? So this tool is just a fib tool. I know traders use the fib levels, right? All of the kind of intermediate levels. For me, I just want to know the high, low, and 50% of a move. So I just took everything else out and just have it draw the high, low, and 50%. DOM settings, there's really no settings, guys. It's just colors. And you need level 2 data in order to see all of the in-between levels. Do I ever trade VIX futures? I don't. Uh, Maybe I should look at them, but I don't trade them. Micro Bitcoin. Micro Bitcoin is a good one to look at as well. Let's take a look. So this is the one market that held up really well through all of the tariff stuff, right? While everything else was selling off, making new lows under the 200 moving average on the daily, Micro Bitcoin was the one that was holding up pretty well, and it looks like it's still continuing to do so. Uh, Again, let's look at Wednesday's price action, right? This was the biggest candle. Why do I keep referring to this candle on all these markets? Because it was the biggest range that we've seen in a ton of these markets, right? Almost $10,000 range in Bitcoin. So I'm looking for the same thing here, right? Can we see some price action above the high of that candle? Because that is the potential beginning of a market structure shift in all of these markets. If we can't find buyers above here, then we just fail right back into the range. So I would attach maybe a VWAP there and see how we trade around there. We closed above it on Friday, which is good, but now does this hold up, right? What I would have loved to see Does this act as a support for us to continue trending higher? 83, 84,000, we'll call it. But if we can't find buyers up there, then I think we just fall back into this range like we have been. We look on a 30-minute chart, you know, a retest of this 50% of Wednesday's range down at 79,135, or this 200 moving average on the 30-minute, which is down at 80,000, wouldn't be out of the question, right? Again, if we can't find buyers up here, the market's falling right back into this range. 80,000 would need to act as a support from that point. So could I short here? I actually don't hate that trade, right? Where we tested above the high of that range. We are kind of using this 20 moving average as a support, but we tested above the high here, couldn't find buyers so far. So my risk doesn't have to be a whole lot here, right? Let's say I traded a one lot short, right? I could risk about $150 to see whether or not this market falls back into this range. And then if it closes above here, then great, I get into the trend to the upside. But we tried to trade above this range. We haven't closed above it. I know we only have, an hour into the session, 30 minutes into the session so far. So it needs some time for some volume to come in. But from a price perspective, because we tested above that high and they're kind of falling back into this range, this would be a cheap short. I'm going to take that trade off because I don't love it, but that would be the idea. How do you attach VWAP? It's just in the drawing tools. Five icons down in drawing tools, you have projection. Then halfway down that menu, you have anchored VWAP. So you click on anchored VWAP and then just click on a candle. It anchors it from there. Right. We're not halfway through the month yet, so I'll save that for at the buzzer. Halfway through the month, I usually attach a VWAP to the beginning of the month and just see how the market is trading. From that, and a lot of times we'll get a reversion to that monthly VWAP. We got a couple of days left, right? Today's April 13th, so we got a couple of days before I'll do that. But something you guys can look at, right? The market that you're trading, attach a VWAP to the first day of the month. Right here it is in the NASDAQ. We could see that acted as a support on Friday, and we traded away from it. So once we get halfway through the month, I'll see kind of where we are in relation to this, and then maybe, come up with some trade ideas from there. Right. We had a couple other markets that we wanted to go over. I did RBOB, did micro Bitcoin. Let's take a look at platinum. Right. So platinum, similar to what we were talking about in RBOB, right? We did extend. Look, if we zoom out in platinum, look at this range. Right? I'm going back to 2022, and it just ranges, right? It trades up to these highs, trades back down to these lows. This range kind of consolidated a little bit where, we can call 1080s the high, and it was really 950s the low. We extended that a little bit, but we're trading right back up into this range from this area here. And if you guys do join at the buzzer, about a month ago, right, early February, I was talking about a potential swing trade that I wanted to put on, buying platinum and just trading it back up towards 1050 because that's the pattern that the market trades. It looks like that's potentially happening again here, right? So again, anything I say here is for educational purposes only, not a suggestion to take a trade. But if I'm looking at the pattern and I zoom out on a daily, probably made the low in platinum, unless something happens where we continue to sell. But this looks like a market that, if we look at this 200 moving average zooming out, it's fairly flat, really no trend here. Nothing has changed in that. So I'd be looking to long this market until we get up to the upper end of this range again, up near 1050s. What does that mean on a shorter time frame? Maybe any pullbacks to the 20 moving average. I'm on a 30-minute chart at this point. Any pullbacks to there are opportunities to buy. But if I'm looking at platinum, I'm only looking to the long side until we get up above those 1050 area. Right. I think I got through most of the questions. Last thing I was going to do is share my quant hour screen. Tell my boss to give me a raise. Appreciate it. I'm a partner here at Topstep, so we work in conjunction with each other. I am a contractor here, but I love being here. I don't know if you guys saw MP's post on Twitter over the weekend, but they're building out a studio for Topstep TV in Chicago, which I think is pretty cool. I'm excited for it. I think it's just the next uh, step in the evolution of Topstep TV, being a financial news network, which is pretty cool. So I enjoy being part of the process, growing the show network with the team, and hopefully helping everybody with their trading. Right. Ultimately, that's the goal of this, to trader education and entertainment. So hopefully everybody is entertained and educated. Or you use this as a fade indicator. But if you do that, hopefully you make some money off that too. Uh, we did the analysis on gold. If you want to zoom out, rewind and kind of take a look at that. I'm not taking a trade right now. I'm looking to buy gold, right? Any opportunity it gives me on a pullback, I'm looking to buy gold. All right, let's switch over to real quick to the Quant Tower screen. You guys should be able to see that. You should hang out at least for an hour. I'll buy you a cup of coffee. I mean, Dakota is going to be here for slow markets, right, in about an hour. The 3-month VIP program is still going on. All right, can you guys see my Quant Tower screen? Be able to see it. Kevin, you're the reason I'm here. Kevin, you're the reason I'm here. I appreciate that. All right. So what I'm looking for on a shorter time frame, right? This is a 3-minute chart. Somebody asked me, do I look at cumulative delta? There's a couple of values that you can see on my screen here. The one on the bottom here is cumulative delta. Right. I'll look at that towards the end of the day. The one in the middle here is delta for that 3-minute candle specifically. Right? Do you need to get this drilled into your volume analysis? You don't. But for me, what I'm looking at, and I normally don't have my charts zoomed in like this, I have them like this, right? So I don't even look at the numbers. I just need to see these colors, right? So I'm looking for, the brighter this color is, the higher the value, right? Either to the negative or the downside, right? So if we can see, the delta for this last 3-minute candle here is negative 52, right? That means there wasn't a ton of aggressive selling here. The delta in this one is negative 307, which means there was a lot of aggressive selling there, right? So again, I'm not looking at the numbers. I'm just looking at the color, right? If it's bright, then it's significant, right? So the second thing I'm looking for, so negative 300, right? This is bright orange. Simple question I asked myself. They sold more contracts were sold than bought in this 3-minute candle. I immediately go to, is there follow through on that selling, right? What did they get for selling here? If you sold 300 contracts here, probably don't want price to bounce, right? So what I'm looking for is, they sold a bunch of contracts. Great. Do they follow it up or not? If they can't follow it and we close above the high of that candle, then whoever sold here is probably becoming a buyer, right? And this is just me, uh, you know, that's a hypothesis. I don't know at the end of the day whether or not that's true, but that's how I'm reading it, right? And it helps me make trading decisions. So I could be completely wrong, but it helps me make trading decisions, right? If they were selling here and price does not go lower, you sell something and it doesn't go lower, you have to buy it back to cover your position. That's how I'm using that information. See, from that point, when we closed above it, we moved pretty much to the upside. Now, what I don't want to try to do is, what you can do, trade location is could be a class in its own. Some people try to preempt the move, right? Where if I go to something like this, say, okay, yeah, this is a bright orange right here. It didn't get any follow through, so I'm buying it. But what didn't happen in this case was we never closed outside of that range, right? So I could preempt this. And say, well, they didn't follow through, so I'm going to buy it. But we never closed outside. And if we look at VWAP, which is this red line now, it's flat. Flat VWAP means what? Range bound market. Once we close outside, then we get some continuation, right? But that's all I'm looking at there. Good time to enter short on gold. I was actually thinking the opposite, but if you see a trade, take it. All right, so that's how I'm using Delta, guys. You're gonna hear people use it a little bit differently, but I'm looking for whether or not there's continuation, whether or not there's actual volume behind a move, and then can I trust that move if they are going to continue it? I think that's it. I think it's going to be another interesting week. Jack will be on Top Step TV, I think, during the day, talking about the bond market. The bond market's been selling off. I'm, not knowledgeable enough outside of a technical analysis approach to give any comments on that, but we are near some lows that we haven't seen in a long time in the bond market. So I know that's not a great thing, right? Selling off the U.S. debt, especially with China being our number two holder of U.S. debt. Uh, so there's opportunity in a bunch of different places. The bond market, the treasury markets being one of them. Do you think Quantower is better than Bookmap? Uh, I Better. I think it's so. The reason I would say it's better, you get a lot of the same volume analysis stuff on Quantower that you can on Bookmap. They actually have an application that looks like Bookmap called the DOM Surface. The reason I like Quantower better is because of the trade execution. Right, placing trades is a lot easier on Quantower than it was on Bookmap. But I've used both. All right, I think that's it, guys. Have you ever used volume profile? I have. I had some profiles up here. I don't use them enough to talk about them. And people ask me all the time. It's like, well, if you do all this volume analysis, why don't you use the profiles? Uh, Personal preference. I just don't like the way they look on the charts. So I find other ways to do it. But I think there's valuable information in it for sure. Where a lot of the analysis that I just did, you could probably throw a profile on and find your levels from there, right? If we just do a weekly volume profile from last week, we got a point of control at 18,500, about, we'll call it there, right? So it is valuable information. I just personally don't use them. Remember, Dakota is going to be doing slow markets in about an hour and a half, 7:30 Central Time. Then we have our newest show on Topstep TV, Aaron Luce doing the London Open. That is at 1 a.m. Central. Of course, we still have D doing Euro Trade at 3:30 a.m. Central Time. And then, uh, of course, the daytime show is starting with the opening call at 7:20. We do have classes all the time in Discord as well. For you guys that maybe didn't know, Coach Hoop, Coach Ray, Coach Vince are doing classes in Discord every day. Coach Hoop starting at 4:30 Central. Coach Ray and Coach Vince 6 p.m. and 7 p.m. Central. If you have questions about volume profile, join Coach Ray's class. If you have questions about market profile and identifying, support and resistance, join Coach Vince's class. If you have questions about outside markets and just a lot of the fundamentals, join Coach Hoop's class. Those are sessions that are done every day in Discord. Anywhere from 100 to 200 people in the class, so you can get your questions answered over there. And the same way we do it here. But those coaches are great and great at what they do. So show them some love over there. If you haven't done so already, hit the thumbs up, like button here. Tell your friends and family to subscribe. You will see all tomorrow. I'll be on Fast Markets tomorrow with the team trading there. We'll see you then. Thanks, everybody.